and welcome back to another episode of the Slick Pivot Sessions. I'm Liz Ward, and this is the podcast where we dig, delve, and deconstruct the journeys of people who have pivoted their careers. I know it can feel rough when you're at a pivot point, so we'll be stripping back the sugarcoating, uncovering the pitfalls and progress of our guests, and unearthing some practical advice for those of you wanting to make a change. Join me as we crack the formula for making a successful pivot in your life or work. My hope is that by sharing these stories, it sparks inspiration on how to design your work life for more happiness and growth. Because I believe that life is too short to do work that doesn't make you happy. I'm super excited to be joined today by my guest, Jenny Simms, owner and brand director of the Marshmallowist, the UK's first gourmet marshmallow company. I chatted to Jenny about how she pivoted from speech writing in Parliament to a sweeter life running a confectionery startup. The Marshmallowist has been at the forefront of setting trends, combining classic confectionery with unexpected flavours like raspberry and champagne or blueberry and gin. The business is run by two sisters, Jenny and Oonagh. Jenny is responsible for brand and sales, while her sister Oonagh dreams up the kitchen creatively. In this Slick Pivot session, we chat about confidence, believing in your product, and how you'll never leave your skills and strengths behind when moving into a new career path. This interview covers loads, like building a brand with no budget, getting on the shelves of major retailers, and what happens when your product goes viral. Jenny is my pal, and I've seen her pivot journey from a distance over the last 5 years. It was great to have her over in my lounge studio to explore her story. Enjoy this Slick Pivot session, and if you like what you hear, please subscribe to this podcast, leave a review and a star rating. Subscribers, written reviews and star ratings really help us grow this podcast, reach more people and bring you fantastic guests. Okay, here goes. So hello Jenny.
Hi Liz.
Thank you for coming on Slick Pivot Sessions.
Thanks for having me.
I am really excited about having this conversation because even though we're really good friends and I've helped support you in your business, we've actually never had this conversation about your personal journey. We've had it a lot in, I suppose, snippets.
We have. We've had small chats,
regularly.
Normally over wine,
Yeah.
or panicked before big meetings, but never sat down and gone through it as a process.
Yeah, and so when I was thinking about guests for this podcast, you were basically my first choice and have always been. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about your career before you became an owner of a marshmallow company, and how you went from the world of politics to confectionery and the kind of ups and downs and pivot points along the way.
Yeah.
So I'm really pleased to have you here in my lounge.
Thank you. It's really comfy.
It's great to dive in. So I want to start, if we can, just to rewind a few years to before you were part of the Marshmallowist. And what was your career and working life like? What did you do?
So I worked in politics for 10 years, across various roles. So I studied politics at university. I did a master's in social and public policy. And I always saw myself going into that sort of quite policy wonk area, really, for want of a better description. It was quite serious. So I worked at the BBC Politics show as a researcher. I did qualitative research studies. I worked for a couple of think tanks, and then I worked in Parliament.
I remember when you worked in
4
Parliament,
years.
because that was when we kind of like reconnected our friendship after school, and you were working in Parliament, and I was like, that is so cool.
It was, yeah, it was. I was there for 4 years, and that was an amazing time. It was a great role and a great opportunity, and I'd wanted it for so long. And after that, I was really passionate about it, and that was the thing. Like that's where I wanted to be.
And And how long had you kind of had that dream about getting to working in Parliament? When did that kind of start for you?
Oh, I mean, as you know, I'm very New Labour, Liz. So since 1997. Since
so
then.
it's a long time.
So since we were 14 at school, yeah. And that's sort of where I saw myself. And I don't necessarily think I wanted to be a politician, but I definitely wanted to work around politics. And I love politics, both with a big P and small p. Like, I love small-time office politics.
And so you were there in this job that you had seen yourself doing. And then what happened?
So after I was in Parliament, I actually got my dream job, or at the time what I thought was my dream job. I was director of a trade union think tank, and the role was really varied. I was given a lot of autonomy. I worked with a steering committee made up of members of some really amazing trade unions, progressive trade unions that I really respected. And I had a great boss who gave me a lot of support and really empowered me into my own decision making, which I hadn't really had before. All the other roles I'd had before were, certainly in Parliament, you're a parliamentary assistant. Everything you do is very much behind the scenes. Everything you write is not with your name at the bottom of it. It's with your MP's name at the bottom. Yeah,
because you were writing for MPs before they went on Newsnight and things like that. You were
writing
what people would say.
Yeah, speeches, early day motions, every letter, pretty much every email. It's never with your name at the bottom of it, which is fine. But this role then gave me an opportunity to chair panel discussions and to have my own thoughts, which I loved it. But it wasn't my job, unfortunately. It was a 12-month cover position, and I knew it was a fixed-term role when I took the job on. But I think when it got to the end of it, I was a bit more shaken than I thought. I wasn't ready to leave.
And you must have felt quite sad, because I think often, I know quite a few people that go into these 12-month fixed contracts or maternity covers and things like that, and you kind of think, if you love the job, maybe there's a chance the person won't come back, or like maybe this will turn into something.
Which is unfair, because I knew that it wouldn't, but and it did open my network. But after that, I took on various interim positions, but there was no permanency to it, or nothing was quite clicking after that. And that's why when the opportunity came up to work with Oonagh, which again was meant to be for 6 months, and that was 5 years ago.
Yeah. So Oonagh is your sister, and Oonagh set up the Marshmallowist on her own.
So Oonagh started the Marshmallowist in 2011, and it was the UK's first gourmet marshmallow company. And she left school at 18, moved to Paris, and trained as a chocolatier and patisserie. And can you imagine?
I know, it's like a book, isn't it?
Yeah. It is. It really is.
Little fairy tale. You can see the film already.
And she stayed in these gorgeous little flats and had with balconies and winding staircases and and making croissants at 5 a.m. Obviously, it all sounds a lot more romantic than it was. It was a pretty hard slog, I think. Mm-hmm. And when she came back to London, she worked for Rococo Chocolates as an assistant head chocolatier there. And at the weekends, she had a stall on Portobello Road selling marshmallows. So I think we call that a side hustle.
Yeah,
now,
I think today you would call that a side hustle.
I think it was probably a Saturday job in 2011.
But she'd invented her own
kind of... No, it was her own recipe.
Yeah.
So she had come up with this amazing marshmallow recipe that she'd seen being made in France, but not ever done over here in the same way. Like beautiful confectionery. And so she started selling them at weekends and garnering quite a lot of attention for them. I mean, by the time I started working with her, she'd already featured in Vogue, The Times, Stylist. Harvey Nichols had asked to stock her. I mean, you know, she was doing really well.
And there was no one like that on the scene.
No,
there was no kind of sweet treat that.
It was at the height of cupcakes.
Yeah.
And what she would do is she was very driven by quite grown-up flavours. She was influenced by cocktails. So the flavours that we make of our marshmallows are raspberry and champagne, blueberry and gin. She worked with quite a lot of drinks companies that initially did quite a few partnerships. She created the world's first Bloody Mary marshmallow, which is spiced tomato and vodka, and is delicious. So no, there wasn't anything like that. And also, you know, committed to not using colourings or flavourings, even natural flavourings. Everything was the fruit and the fresh herbs and the spices and alcohol, real alcohol, not, you know, Prosecco.
So she was onto a good thing.
She really was, yeah. And also she was really passionate about it.
And what was the pivot point for you then to kind of go into that? You said that there was like, you went for a 6-month short-term contract and you're like,
so,
okay.
Quite clearly she was reaching the point where she needed to expand and grow. And she had Harvey Nichols coming to her. Selfridges had come to her and said, we want to stock you. She had a book contract offered to her with Penguin Random House. She needed to take on more staff. She needed to hire. She needed commercial packaging making so it could go onto the shop floor as opposed to being sold on the deli. She needed proper branding. She needed a new website. And because I'd been working across communications and essentially, you know, branding and comms for in the political field, she thought she would come to me because she didn't know really who else to go to. I mean, she'd been doing it on, you know, all of this kind of thing on her own and decided.
Sounded like she needed a bit of help. You know, she had loads of opportunities, and also, you know, you were really good at writing, and one of your superpowers is that kind of communication.
Yeah, and also I feel as though she also needed the support of having me there. And I also needed to do something. I needed to get back into doing something that I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I felt that I was doing bits and pieces and losing my way a bit. So that's why I thought, okay, 6 months, come on, let's do this. I'll help you with the book. We'll get this branding sorted. We'll get your packaging sorted. And that was, for me, was going to be these initial projects that would then set her up to be able to take it and carry on her own.
Okay. And what happened?
We got busier. And it's true. We got busier. We took on more staff. We took on more contracts. And we started really working effectively as a team. And I was learning so much, and she was learning so much, and we were working so well together that I think we still haven't had that conversation of, weren't you meant to be doing something else now? You know, we haven't found time to have the conversation.
Well, it sounded like you kind of got into it and liked it, and you know, and what was it like then for you to have been in the politics world and doing I suppose your brand before was part of the kind of politics scene, and now you're in a startup, you're talking about marshmallows every day. How was that transition to something quite different?
So interestingly, I don't feel as though I talk about marshmallows every day.
Okay.
And I feel as though what we talk about, and certainly what I'm doing in the business, is really not that dissimilar to what I was doing before. So on a day-to-day basis, we make a product that we're really proud of. And we use amazing ingredients and that we source ethically. We have staff that we've brought on and we've trained, that we pay well, and we run a business where it's about showing how you can have confectionery product and craft something that you genuinely think is better than anything else out there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the same as campaigning. You wouldn't go and work for an MP or a political party unless you genuinely thought their message was better than anything else out there.
One of the things
And
I see quite often is when people work on something they don't believe in, then they feel that tension. And that when I meet people that want to change their jobs, it's usually because they're kind of lost the love for the product or the service or the thing that they're working on. Okay.
Yeah.
So.
And that's exactly it. So I don't feel as though, you know, what I'm doing is that dissimilar to what I was doing before.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really interesting. So you kind of kept all your skills.
Yeah.
You haven't left any of those skills.
And got so many, you know, new skills.
So you've added to your kind of like tool belt.
Yeah.
But you've kept the ones that were on there before. Because I think some of the times people think when they kind of pivot into something else, they're leaving the old stuff behind.
Yeah.
But you're not really, are you?
No, not at all. And I think it's taken me a while to realise that. I've been doing it 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we've spoken about this before, but it took me quite a while to see my place within the business as having agency rather than just supporting Oonagh.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been the transition, you know, only in the last year, I'd say, for me, maybe a year to 18 months, is saying, well, this is my role, this is what I do, and I'm gonna, you know, put myself forward as to what I do in the business and how that differentiates from what Oonagh does in the business, but together we make a really great team.
Yeah.
As opposed to just putting everything out as Oonagh.
And so becoming a partnership and letting yourself kind of almost commit to that, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. And I'd say it's interesting that I never thought of it. I thought of my career move as maybe being a bit of a career pause, almost as though I was going to go back to doing something else rather than seeing it as a pivot into, this is what I do and I'm good at doing it. So.
Yeah. And how do you feel about it now?
I love it. I mean, I couldn't be happier. It was the right choice for me.
But it just took a while to.
It took a while to see that it was the right choice for me.
Yeah. You are a mum, and I know you've got a little bub. You've got 2 now. What's life like as a working mum, running your own business?
I think it's the perfect job for me because I'm running a business with someone who loves my children and understands the pressures that's brought with that.
Yeah.
And I would like to think that I would have the same support in another role. I don't think I would have done. And it's been a personal journey for me to get to this point because, as you know, both my daughters were conceived through IVF, and getting to that stage and the amount of emotional and physical
all the stuff that comes with that, it's so complex.
It's been years.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're so lucky. We've now got, you know, a 2.5-year-old daughter and an 8-week-old daughter. But I don't think that I would have been able to do that in any other position. I'd like to think I could, but but at the moment this is really working.
Yeah. And how does your week play out with the kind of kids and the work? I know you've got an 8-week-old, so technically you're kind of on maternity leave. Sort of. And you know, you and I have both kind of done maternity leave, which doesn't really, it's not really a thing when you've got your own business. Because I know for me, I when I had my second, I said I am having a year off for this one, and then I didn't, and I ended up working a lot. And my little one, it was his first birthday yesterday, and I did a lot of work in the last year and managed to kind of fit it in, but with a bit of kind of mum guilt going on and a bit of tension. How are you finding it?
Well, interestingly, firstly, I decided to have my second baby at our busiest time of the year, just before Christmas.
Yeah.
So I was very much expecting to have 2 weeks off, which I think I was back on emails and certainly talking to Oonagh about business plans after 2 weeks. But
you were on your sofa.
Me happy. But I was on my sofa, and I am, and I'm still on a sofa. This is so I can email now whilst breastfeeding.
Yeah.
And I can take phone calls during naps. And actually, you just get better at being more productive and working more efficiently.
Yeah.
And that's what I found. I mean, Oonagh and I had a conversation about this the other day, that I did 3 hours work the other day, and I think it was perhaps more than we'd managed to get out in a whole week, pre-baby. But you're much more focused.
Yeah. Absolutely, because you've only got a certain window of opportunity,
and you're ready for it.
Yeah, and I find you're often like thinking about things and ideas come whilst you're doing the other bits. So yeah. I might be like washing bottles or something, and then have a real inspired idea.
Yeah.
And one of the things about kind of like being around the house a lot and only getting work in every now and again. You are focused. And I think when you're working all day, sometimes it's harder to get that inspiration.
And also, I'm not doing the hard stuff here, Liz. I leave all that to Oonagh. I'm doing the fun, creative things, and I get to be quite bossy.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about that. So you are the brand director.
I am.
And so you're in charge of all things looking good and sounding good.
Exactly.
And you have done an absolutely incredible job.
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, high five to you. You've got beautiful, beautiful packaging, and I know you have incredibly high standards about everything that goes out.
Yeah.
How was it for you building a brand startup style?
It's different, isn't it? If you're used to having a budget, be it for anything, and you suddenly have to start working with no budget. When you have high standards.
Yeah.
It's tricky. But what we've really enjoyed the most is that it's our business. So we get to make those decisions.
You're not sending it to anyone else to sign off.
And no one else is getting sign off. Yeah, it's our sign off. So we had this idea when we first started with the packaging that we didn't want it to be pink or pastel or look homemade or be part of that, this is a homemade cake or cupcake. I think at the time it was very much cupcakes. So that's sort of my reference. We wanted something to be bold and directional about our branding and packaging. So we wanted it to look very graphic. And we took that through with our website, and we took it through our Instagram and our photography and everything that we did around it. And it's questionable whether that was a good decision. Some people love it, and then some people think it's not for them. It's too progressive, or it looks too much like cosmetics packaging, or instead of food packaging. And I mean, the amount of meetings that we've gone to with buyers where they tell us they love our product, but could we put it in a clear plastic bag with a bow?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because that's what they know.
Because
that's the world.
Exactly.
Because you're kind of like innovating in a world of confectionery where people see marshmallows through a plastic bag that are pink and white, and that's what we know.
And they're not ready for them to be made differently, and they're not ready for the flavours to be challenging. Mm-hmm. And to me, they don't taste like marshmallows. This is a really new confectionery product that we've got, and so that's the tipping point.
Yeah, I know that I love them, but they're great like for like posh baby showers and gifting and
and weddings and canapes and gifting and that kind of treat.
Yeah. And so when you get that kind of response, how have you from the buyers? How do you respond to that?
We haven't changed our style. We just haven't.
And that's why you've got you're building a really strong brand, because you're not kind of compromising.
You've got to be committed to it. Yeah. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah. If you take everyone's opinions in here, there, and everywhere, then you're going to end up like murking the waters.
Yeah.
And so let's then talk about supermarkets and stuff like that. And I know some of your key highlights have been being stocked in some cool places. Yeah. Can you share more about that journey into John Lewis and Harrods?
So both Oonagh and I will say that I think that our proudest moment was being taken on by John Lewis. And we worked with you. We did a session on building our confidence before we went into that interview. Was it an interview? It was a meeting.
It was a meeting.
A meeting. But you're very much there to be interviewed about your product.
That shows it felt like an interview.
It really felt like an interview.
But can you share a bit about how you got in that room? Because I think that would be interesting for people to hear. It's like, how did you actually get there?
So we've been trying to get into John Lewis for years, and it's very difficult to get hold of buyers' contact details.
I can imagine.
And somehow we'd managed to get the home and gift head buyer's email address. And you can send emails to buyers for months and have no response. And we sent the buyer an email speculatively, and it went to the wrong person and eventually got passed on to the right person.
Well, that's great that they forwarded it on.
Yeah.
And sometimes you think
it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. And so some good person sent that on.
Because you'd like to think there was a trick to it. You'd like to think that somehow you start running a business and you know instantly how to be able to get into stores. Yeah. But it's just that,
I mean, I know when I've worked in really big companies, like getting prospect emails and then having so many emails in my inbox, sometimes I would think, oh, who is the best person for this email, and forward it on. And other times not, because I was having a busy day and then it'd get lost in the inbox. So you had somebody that went, needs to go to so-and-so, and they forwarded it on.
They forwarded it on, and she got in touch and said, we're not really interested right now because we're about to go with this similar product. But, thanks for getting in touch and, keep us updated. And we responded immediately with, stop.
Stop right there.
What's your address? We're going to courier you our product so it's with you by the morning. Please try it, and then we don't need to hear anything more from you.
But you could have just gone,
thanks very much.
They said no and sat back, but you went, stop
right there. I know it works. As soon as people try them, they love them.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And that's the difference between having your own business and believing in the product and just doing it for someone else, because you would normally get back to your senior manager and say, no, they didn't want it, they said they were going to go with something else, as opposed to going to go outside your door and wait until you've tried them.
Yeah. So you sent the box.
We sent the box, and we had a courier receipt, so we knew that it had been delivered. And within half an hour of them being delivered, she'd sent us an email asking for a meeting.
No.
So we knew that she was keen, and the meeting was for the following week. So we went to John Lewis head office, both Oonagh and I, and I really don't think we've ever been quite so anxious about any meeting. And within half an hour of being in the meeting, they told us they were going to stock us. They told us in the room.
Yeah. How amazing.
which is fantastic. And that's definitely one of, because most of the time these things do happen over email, or because nobody really has time for meetings. So you send in your product and then it happens over email, and then they send off a purchase order, and you don't really have time to get those relationships built. So that was definitely one of our proudest moments.
Oh, I'm so pleased for you. So, and what's really interesting to hear is that, these things do not happen overnight. Like, you've wanted it to happen for years, literally years. And, you tried a number of different tactics. And then it was like, okay, you know what? We just got to get these on their desk.
Yeah.
And you had that you had a person, you had a name.
Yeah.
That's tell me another kind of, I call them slick pivot high five moments. Can you tell me another moment where you were just like, wow, this business is working
really well? So last year we started off the year and we'd had not a great Christmas, I have to say. And that meant that we were coming into the January at a bit of a low point. And back in the summer, Oonagh had created a CBD marshmallow. It was incredible. It's cannabis, grapefruit and pink peppercorn flavour marshmallow. And it has 10 milligrams of CBD. And we'd been featured in, several publications, but it's quite unusual to have a high-end confectionery product containing CBD, and people were talking a little bit more about CBD.
CBD was kind of coming onto the scene,
really
wasn't it, a bit?
Yeah. And thankfully we were one of the first, so it meant that when newspapers were picking it up that in LA it was a trend in cocktails and trying to look for examples here, we were there with a product ready to go. And in the end of January, we featured on ITV's This Morning. Now, we knew we were going to be on because they'd requested samples, but we didn't quite know when. So it was a bit of a surprise when they bumped our feature up to that week. And we were all happened to be in the bakery at the time, and we huddled around our laptop.
So they told you it was coming on TV before it went live?
Before it went live, but literally the day before.
Right.
They said, we're going to move your CBD marshmallows to be featured tomorrow.
Okay.
Oh, that's nice, we thought.
So it's like This Morning, that's with Phil.
Phil and Holly, yeah. And they tasted them live on air. Now, you can imagine someone doing a live tasting of your product. I mean, we were sat behind the computer just thinking, oh, please like them.
Oh,
please
God.
Like them.
The tension.
Anyway, they loved them. And not only did they love them, but the presenter, Alice Beer, who presents the consumer section of This Morning, also had a fabulous anecdote about them, which meant that clip of Phil and Holly eating them, and also the presenter talking about our marshmallows, went viral because it was picked up by Metro, The Express, The Sun. Well, within 5 minutes, our online shop had gone completely crazy. We'd sold out of all our existing stock within an hour.
Oh my God.
And because it had then been picked up by press, by the following day, we were on the phone to our packaging company having to put in an emergency order of packaging because we were selling more than we could physically make.
So you didn't have enough boxes to put the marshmallows in. So
what a great problem to have.
It's that really good problem. My product has kind of gone a little bit bananas, and now we've got to fulfill that. And a complete unexpected kind of turn of events, and that's the beautiful thing about PR, isn't it? So everybody wants this dream PR, but it's that readiness. You can't be ready all the time to fulfill.
You can't, and also you just can't know what's going to click and what's not. Yeah.
So on that day, how did you feel?
Oh, completely elated. And it saved us, really, because we really had gone into January thinking, oh, well, we haven't done as well this Christmas, and we've taken some decisions that haven't worked so well for us. And yet that just refocused into, no, we make a really good product which is innovative that people want, and that's why we're here and doing well. And it just gave us the impetus to go into last year with confidence.
Yeah. How do you cope personally with the kind of highs and lows, the roller coaster of emotion?
Dreadfully, Liz. Dreadful.
Yeah, I mean, do you have any like on like bad days where everything's like a bit woeful? Like, what do you do?
Awful, but I have an Oonagh, and thankfully she is the Tigger to my Eeyore.
Oh.
So I don't think I've ever called her that before. So.
But in terms of like, because quite a few people ask me, you know, they might want to set up a business or it might be lonely. Mm-hmm. What's your view on like co-founder? Obviously, you work with your sister. Mm-hmm. That must have its kind of joys and challenges, but it sounds like what you're saying is that, you know, it is a really good partnership.
It is. I think it's the easiest working relationship I've ever had. I think it helps that I'm the eldest.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, I feel work issues get resolved. I think they don't fester. I think things can blow up a lot more easily between us, but they also settle down again quickly. There's no boundaries as well. I mean, work carries on at night time, at weekends. You know, I could phone her at 8:00 to talk about something, and then suddenly you're back onto work, or it's a Saturday morning and then suddenly you're back onto work. But that's great, because in the times that we are working together, because I have to say, Oonagh works in the bakery in Yorkshire, and I'm mainly at home in London, apart from, you know, when I go up for week-long stints to work up there together.
So you're not sitting next to each other?
We're not next to each other. We work remotely. But when we do work together, it feels as though we're just hanging out, you know, it's fantastic.
I heard Pippa Murray from Pip and Nut interviewed the other day, and she said, somebody asked her if you could do anything differently, what would you do? And she said if she started another business, she would get a co-founder, just because of having that someone to bounce ideas off and like celebrate the highs and, you know, be together in the, you know, in those low points to keep each other going.
Yeah, I think it's really important. But I know we've spoken about this before, because you've worked with co-founders and co-founder relationships, and what's your read on it?
I think I've seen. Well, I think it's interesting that you guys are sisters.
Yeah,
because I think
that's a different.
There
dynamic.
Is a real. You've got very, very, very similar values, and so you think very. You know, almost the two of you are kind of like the same person. Yeah. in some ways, you kind of look at the world in a very, very similar way. And I've seen quite a few co-founder relationships start well, but go. Get more tense when their ambition is slightly different. The vision for the company is mismatched, and people's different working styles and kind of wants and needs don't marry up. And I think it's almost like got to be a perfect jigsaw puzzle to come together to work well. And a lot of you know, some startups that I do see, there can be a challenge with those co-founders. And I've worked with some people that have looked for a co-founder, you know.
Oh right.
Yeah, like and have been, well, not on Tinder, but actually
co-founder Tinder.
You know, a lot of people are like, how can I find like a sidekick on this? Yeah. Because they don't want to go it alone. And I have considered it myself, because, you know, I'm a solo entrepreneur, as they call it. But I think that challenge of finding that person that is going to see the same vision and have complementary skills. Because if you're so similar, there can be a mismatch if you're both very similar. Yeah, you know, so and if you're both like marketeers, or you're both the sales guy, you kind of need to have like somebody that really, really owns the product, and somebody that really, really can own like the building of the brand and the communication, or like the really, really business person. And if everyone's kind of fighting for the same corner, then you have a whole skill set in the company that doesn't get fulfilled.
Yeah.
And there's a kind of bit of elbows in the way. So I think it's quite a fine balance.
Yeah, it's tricky. I was going to say, because Oonagh and I, although we're so similar and we have the same vision, and you laugh because, you know, we sound exactly the same, and we have sort of the same thoughts, we're so different in terms of skills. She's so incredibly practical, and she does things in a kitchen, whereas I'm not even allowed to really hold a knife in the kitchen.
You have to stay well out of there. So what would the old Jenny say to the new Jenny?
Your hair looks good. Sorry.
Hey, it does look good.
It does look good at the moment, doesn't it? I would say just have confidence. I think this is it's a problem that, I mean, I know a lot of women have talked about imposter syndrome, and I think it may be a bit of that, because you think, should I be running my own business? Do I know enough to run my own business? And you realise that actually no one else really knows what they're doing. Everyone else is just trying to run a business or trying to do a job which they're not quite sure they know how to do it, or what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And I think it would just be confidence. And I think it's actually come from having children that you become more confident.
You just suddenly realise the power of the stuff you can do.
Yeah. Look what I just did in 3 hours.
Yeah. So have confidence. That's
just
lovely.
Confidence every time. Yeah.
And if you're, what advice would you give to somebody that wants to start a food startup, or is kind of in the early stages and process of having a food company?
I would say be good. So I know that sounds a bit odd, but for me, I think we all know the problems that are associated with food and food justice, say from poor agricultural wages to questionable industrial policies, environmental impact of what you're making, price fixing. And I would say don't start a food company unless you're really committed to making a product that does something better, that makes things better, really. And I think that's the part that really mattered to me, because I realised that Oonagh was making something that really was changing how people perceived a category. And I see so many people starting food companies because it's a trend, and then employing people on poor wages or using poor quality ingredients. And I just feel as though you need to be a bit more self-aware if you're starting a food company now.
But it is becoming important for companies and consumers. People are, almost giving a bit more of a shit about what they're eating, where it's coming from, what it's, how much plastic's involved, what's the process. I think that's a really good tip. Thanks for that. So I'm asking everyone this question. What would you say your formula is for pivoting? Like, what are the ingredients to transition from one career to another?
I would say having strong values.
But knowing what your values are.
Yeah, having strong personal values. So for me, it had to be that what we were doing was ethical, that we were honest about how we were producing our product. So we still make everything ourselves, we don't outsource. And that it had integrity. So why are you doing it? Why are you making it? What it has, for me, what we do has purpose, and that to me is the differentiation between doing something that I can easily do, or doing something that I love and doing something for me and do something that makes things better. And I genuinely think this is making something better.
I totally love that, because I completely agree. Like, if you're doing something that you really, really believe in, and you know, purpose, the P word kind of gets thrown around, doesn't it? And a little bit. But it's really, really true. If you believe what you are doing as an individual and the thing that you're putting out into the world is
and the choices
making
you're making,
and you're aligned with that purpose, then I think that's what keeps you motivated, you know, and makes you want to work at the weekend and put that extra effort in.
And that's what makes it an effective pivot, I think. It wasn't because I actually still had that grounding, that rooting, that what I was doing had purpose.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing everything. It's been really fun to dive into all of this. And so where can we find the Marshmallowist?
You can find us online, www.themarshmallowist.com. Come to us there, and our socials, Marshmallowist at the Marshmallowist.
And you also do a fabulous newsletter, don't you?
We do. Yes, we do. Sign up for that. Yeah. And if you sign up, you get 10% off your first order as well.
Thank you very much for coming in, Jenny. And I'm sure this won't be our last conversation.
Liz, it will never be our last conversation. Just try and stop us.
You've been listening to the Slick Pivot Sessions with me, Liz Ward, the podcast for life's achievers and believers. I hope you've enjoyed listening as much as I've enjoyed talking. Please take a moment to rate and review us on Apple or Google or wherever you get your podcasts. This helps us to grow and continue to bring you amazing guests. The show notes have all the links and references from today's session. And for one-to-one coaching or to find out about my Pivot Power programs, log on to slickpivot.com. Until our next session together, stay nimble and remember, no pivot is ever slick.